Hey guys, Jeff here. So this is the, I don't want to say final version, but close to final version that I actually took an RTN this weekend. I ended up missing Saturday because they just moved. But this Sunday I went to one and I got top 4. Now, unfortunately, spoiler alert, I ran into a Kano in top 4. The only one. You can guess how that probably went. So, I'll just go over what I did matchup-wise and some improvements that I made to the deck. And this is like the semi-final version, but I still need to do some work on it to try to figure out things to do for next week, which I'll just post an update if I do it again. But I am qualified for Nats, which is really nice, so I don't have to worry about that through the rest of the season. So round 1, I went against an Ira. It's a pretty easy matchup. Unfortunately, the guy that I faced, who was a local, he very specifically tuned it in such a way that he said it's basically not able to win into Riptide whatsoever. I don't quite understand the ins and outs of that, but I believe the guy because he plays a bit of Riptide. This is the 03 podcast people. Round 2, I went against Syndra. Syndra, this one actually ended up going undefeated in Swiss, but unfortunately lost in top 4. I ended up losing to him because I had full tempo for control over the game, and then I had a double crew hand, and the matchup is very, very to the wire, and navigating very specifically to the end game to run them out of gas. So having a hand where you end up IPing yourself and just taking free damage like that is really bad. So I ended up taking 3 extra damage, which the end result was me at 1 in their final turn. They were able to, flick knives. I had 1 shelter left, and they had about 1 turn worth of gas left for me to then be, and they were at about 5. So it would have been really, really good having that extra 3 life near the end of the game. I probably would have been able to eke by through a win with just the shelter alone. And like I said, they pretty much had no gas left. After the game, I decided, okay, I'm going to trim down a little bit, and I cut one of the pitfall traps down to 69 cards. And I'll check if I need to trim it down a little bit more, but at 5, the crew traps for the rest of the event actually felt like they did not hit together, which was incredible. It just strictly felt better, all things considered, ratio-wise. There's some weird variants that can happen still, but I don't know, 5 felt like the nice sweet spot. Round 3, I went against Azalea. I had full control over the game. Had some scary dominates near the end of the game, but I was able to navigate through them pretty fine and just squeak out the win pretty easily near the end. Round 4, Syndra. With that change, I was able to easily get them down to the fatigue of the end game with about 9 life over it, which was nice. Not much to say about that one. Round 5 was Verdance. I lost that. This deck pretty much auto loses to most wizards. Acelio you can kind of work around, and certain builds of Verdance you can kind of navigate through. But for the most part, wizard is basically an auto loss. Same thing with Viserai. Viserai in this build is so close to an auto loss. You can still kind of win it, and I've increased this percentage with the matchup guide as much as I could, but it's just not quite there. I'll talk about it later. So, going to top 8, I went against a Syndra, different Syndra, and same thing as the one in round 4, I was able to fatigue them out and get them to a end game state where I had, I believe, 12 life. Worked out very well. The change, like I said, I felt it. I felt the difference because you're going through your deck really, really, really hard in a couple cycles near the end, so you actually see these cards. Getting more out of the deck is really nice, being able to just know that they're done and you got your free damage. Into top 4, I thought the bracket was going to be different. I was apparently wrong, and I thought, oh cool, I'm going into the Syndra. That's awesome. I'm pretty much guaranteed to top 8. Unfortunately, on the other side of the bracket, I was like, there's a Viserai and Kano. I was wrong, so I ended up actually going against the Kano. It was a very close game, and I actually started thinking about some changes to the deck, which I'll go over here soon. But I ended up losing at the end. They, had a Kano play where they were like, hey, yeah, here's a Aether Wildfire and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Oh, blind flip off the top, Sonic Boom into another 0 that gets buffed by Aether Wildfire. And I'm like, that about does it. If they whiffed on the flip and just got a regular pop with anything else but Sonic Boom. I think I might have been able to get there because I had all 3 shelters left, and they would have been at 1. I think I could have gotten there, honestly. So let's go to the deck list real quick. So here is the full list that we have. Some of the noticeable changes that some people may not have seen is we run the 1 Calming Breeze, and this Blood Rot Trap is a flex slot. I actually did not like it, and it consistently was average, is the best way I can put it. It didn't feel like it did anything really. Felt like a win more card, I guess is the way to put it. I think I might cut it, but it's also not terrible. I gotta test a little bit more with it. Some of the things that really performed very well were having the 2 premeditates as opposed to 3 a lot. The 1 of Erase Face did its job. It was the instance of just a random case of, hey, Syndra, here's something you have to block. And it did, like I said, it did the job. This blue salvage shot, it does exactly what it's meant to do. The Calming acts as a 4th shelter, especially for the Syndra matchup. And ironically enough, the Calming does indeed help with the Wizard matchups and makes it a little bit more manageable. You don't want 2 because the 4th Calming kind of interacts fine with Shelter because you can just block for 4 with Shelter. But if you have 2 Calming, your turn does not block well that turn. And that's not a good place to be. So the 4th one is literally just as a extension of a Shelter. But if you get a Shelter, you can just use it as a regular D-React. So it's like a nice little balance I found. The last thing I really feel like I need to change is I don't know how good New Horizons is. It is consistently this just very small margin that's really hard to test for, because some matches you can't test for it because you just lose for other reasons. So I'm gonna have to delve a little bit more into it and see what matchups actually need it, and then see how much it actually affects it. I might switch to Crown of Providence. Some people have suggested Skullcap. I don't really like Skullcap because your opponent can navigate around it a lot. It doesn't really help in the Kano matchups or anything like that because they're always pretty much going to be at lower life than you, or if you're able to AB off of Skullcap, you're pretty much already dead anyways. Hamstring did very well. It was actively annoying for a lot of the opponents to deal with, so that's really good. And yeah, it all performed very well, especially after I tweaked some of the sideboard stuff. But those 2 are the slots that I think I need to switch around. I will say that if you yourself really do not like running New Horizons or just don't have one, Crown of Providence, fine. I think that the percentage is kind of negligible, but sometimes you need to tweak that. So that's up to you. And then this slot, some things to consider is 1 of Feign Death I've considered, Oasis for Spite, just something to have a little pocket for Wizards. Can make or break that matchup sometimes. I've also considered Pummel as for these really long matchups whenever you need to make a, for example, weakest link hit against Enigma or something. You can just have this cheeky 1-of card that just makes them scared for the rest of the game. So for the matchups, you're pretty much just fat decking into most Assassins and Warriors. Actually, all the Assassins and Warriors. I forgot about that. Aurora, you are trimming down, cutting things like your reaction traps. Premeditate, because if you're in an aggro, I'm going to fatigue you out matchup. Having premeditate, you're not going to have 3 cards in hand in most cases. So anytime you see this card, you're usually in the blocking phase of the game, and it blocks 2. You don't need these extra cards in this matchup. You're not going to go to fatigue on yourself. You'll be fine with just Quiver. You don't need Remembrance. So I just don't see the point of bringing it in. However, Calming Breeze, gas in that matchup. Absolutely wonderful. Azalea, you end up trimming down as much as humanly possible, but you maintain as many of the cards that help you navigate through that matchup. Remembrance, unironically, is very good into this matchup. You can get some like good power stuff back, but the reason why it's beneficial is to give you a extra card to navigate around a dominate arrow, and in some cases it actually lets you navigate around a, say, for some reason they have increased attention, or if they run Dreadbore, lets you navigate around that. Syndra, I already kind of explained it. You don't want to cut, you don't want premeditate, you don't want this, you don't want that. It's pretty straightforward. Into a bunch of these matchups, minus Rhino, where you cut Calm, you are pseudo fat decking, you're just not running Remembrance. Florian, you are trying to go to a fatigue game, but you are trimming a little bit. You can kind of cut some of the pendulums if you want to, or just cut them in entirety if you really want to go a little bit more aggressive. But Florian is a really long, hard game. You're going to fatigue unless they have Scepter of Pain. Scepter of Pain Florian is basically unwinnable. You may as well just go get lunch if they flip it. Guardian, you cut Calm because you don't want that card in your deck whenever you're playing that matchup, because it only ever gets a value of 1, and that's usually not good. Against Illusionist, you keep Calm because they'll have a lot of instances of breakpoints, say like in the case of Prism, where they send like their 1 for or 2 for 7s or whatever it is. Giving them 3 cards or 2 cards in armor kind of sucks, but if you have a Calming Breeze, you can cover that. You can also cover a little bit of damage through the Angels as well. Against Enigma, especially near the late game, you can use Calming Breeze to kind of mitigate some of the damage that happens and block some of those breakpoints without giving a whole bunch of cards. And if you combine it with a Frailty, it's really awesome because you get to block a full bout of a couple of Spectral Shields. So it's really nice. Illusionist and Guardian, you are 100% running Flight Path. They are meant to give you a power spike turn to, against Illusion, get rid of threats on board. I've literally used the combo between these to just say, here's Endless Arrow, throw it into an Angel, give it go again, come back to hand, pitch this card in hand, put it back in, and swing for 5 because there was low life total to deal with threat and still put pressure on the life total. Against Guardian, you kind of use it to set up a really big power spike turn. So if you can throw, say, like a Battering Bolt or a Murky, one play I've done a lot is throwing a Murky, and if I say have an Endless Arrow, we'll throw that. So I have exactly a yellow. I've done this countless times before. I've put Murky in with the Sharpshooters, sent it for 7, gave it go again, it hits, I get a trap, put the trap in Arsenal, trench it, use a resource, put Endless Arrows. Or if you have a blue and you do this, you can send a 1 cost and then you can send it for 6. So you get 13 damage, power spike turn, but you also get a card back in the deck off of Murky, and they have to block out so you get to steal full tempo out of that situation. These are just a little bit of an understanding of what's going on with these kind of matchups, because people ask me these questions a lot. Against Kano, you're basically just cutting all your red traps, and you're just getting as many resources as you can in your deck, cutting down to 60 as much as possible. You want to see all the good cards. KO and Levia, it's pretty straightforward. You're just cutting these. You're doing the same thing against them. You're using these to have a small power spike turn. Also, I don't like having flexors against them because I don't like having my stuff intimidated randomly and being like, oh, okay, crap, now I have to pitch maybe more into flexors, or they just break the chain. But usually they're only going like 3 wide, so you're barely getting a good amount of value off flexors. I'd rather have Flight Path, not have to pitch a card from hand, have an extra 1 block, and then have a power spike turn against like Levia, where you just say, hey, you have to block, or you're either taking a bunch of damage or you lose your Blasphemous. So sometimes that's the relevant thing. The mirror, you are trimming down as much as possible. You keep your crew traps in because for the most part, you're playing the mirror with a Dreadbore. If they don't have Dreadbore, you win the game. So as a result, you just keep these because they're basically the same thing as these anyways, but they always ping and they have a better effect. And you keep as many ones that you can. Against aggro, you like the tar pit because if you put in an arsenal, you can full block, say, a Ravenous Rabble, and then prevent any on hit on the next arrow, or whatever comes next after that. You keep a bunch of these 2 costs because you can still send them, they're relevant, since he's really big in the matchup. Same thing, like I said, against the Azalea, you keep the Remembrance because you're able to actually navigate through that Dreadbore a little bit easier. And you keep your main traps because, especially against the aggro variant, they still do tend to run snaps a lot. Some don't run perch at all, some like to run in the matchup, it's all preference. But you run this because if you do get it off, it is a lot of value. In the pure fatigue mirror, have fun. Have fun. Acelio is probably the easiest of the actual wizards. You trim your deck down as much as possible, but you run stuff that you think can trigger. Because they run Channel Valley, having the 0 for 4 that prevents on hits is actually kind of helpful. So you're trying to trim down on those as much as you can, but also run as many good stuff. You are trying to fatigue them out as much as possible, or put as much pressure on them because your battering bolts really hurt, Erase Face is really annoying, and CNC is hard for them to deal with. So you have a lot, and the Collapsing Trap can really ruin their turn. So you can actually kind of interact with him. Verdance, it's a fatigue game. You gotta get this to hit, and you gotta get their healing pots if they're on the like trying to combo you out at the end game. Otherwise, if they're just playing the value game and trying to just attack you and they get value off a channel tree or channel millennium tree and like try to play that game plan, you're probably losing. It's just so hard to actually extract value in that matchup. You really have to try and like hope, honestly. Viserai, it's the same thing. You trim down, you try to just fatigue them out as much as you humanly can. It's a rough matchup. Same thing with the Flight Path. You're pitching for AB most of the time. Flight Path is just strictly better than Flexors in this matchup. The reason why I don't run Calming Breeze is because realistically speaking, like, I'd just rather have a blue, and there's not really anything you can cut because you still want Inertia Trap to try to limit whatever turn cycles they do have. I'd rather have this yellow. If you want to cut something, you can cut the Pendulum Trap. I would prefer yellow so that I can actually navigate through some of my other turns. I just think it's better because they don't just send arcane damage. They also send physical damage. Vincent, you just gotta navigate it correctly and understand when you can take a little bit of damage to throw pressure. Remorseless is really annoying for them. Stuff like Hamstring Shot can really mess up their turn cycle. You're really at the liberty of how much their deck giveth or how much it punishes, is really what it comes down to. If it punishes them, you can just make their day really frustrating. If it doesn't punish them, ultimately your goal is to try to do another Power Spike turn like that to force them to block, to force tempo. That's the best you can do in that matchup. It's not as bad as Vis. It's probably around 40 to 50%. It's very doable, but if it lines up bad for you, then like you can't do anything about it. You just don't have the necessary tools to put pressure. Enough pressure on them to be able to do anything. Because like the way that we have to build the deck really forces us to go in a direction that does not help against Rune Blades for the most part. It forces us to go more into leaning with Ninja, Assassin, and Warrior. And then our tool set kind of navigates around, it works with Aurora, but also navigates around having actual play into a lot of the other decks, but forgoing the Wizard matchup and the Vis matchup, which as a result also makes us a little bit worse into Vincent, because there's not really many on hits that she cares about except for maybe Remorseless, Hamstring Shot, and like sometimes Battering. But even then, like Battering Bolt, usually they'll just block it and it's fine. CNC only kind of works because she naturally has a IP penalty, so a lot of times she doesn't have an arsenal, and even when she does, she'll just give you 2 cards. Anyways, I appreciate you guys joining me, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I usually regular in the Purple Discord and the Discord channel a lot, so if you don't feel like putting on this video and you want a more live conversation, feel free to ask me, and I can help out where I can. If you don't know, my name's Alathos on there. Go ahead and hit me up.